Hello everybody and welcome back to the Analytical Lion on Com Radio. I'm Josh Davis. Thank you all for joining me. Got a stacked show for you all today. I'm going to analyze the Ohio State game. I'm going to preview the Indiana game, two of the top games of the season for Penn State football. I'm going to recap some of the top games around college football from Week 10. I'll take a peek at some of the games going on in Week 11. Then let's get a grasp on the wild playoff picture right now. And then, finally, I'll talk about Penn State basketball as they get their season tipped off. Let's talk about Ohio State. The first half of that game showed a lot of preparation and grit from Penn State. The defense contained OSU's talented receivers for the most part, and the 2 touchdown drives, those were well planned and executed. The run game felt unique and was successful. Grunkmeyer was able to distribute just enough to crank out first downs. That defensive stop near the goal line, that was a nice play by DeLuca. That was huge to force the field goal. And then obviously the forced fumble by Denida Sutton, picked up by Chaz Coleman, that completely flipped the script of the first half. However, the issue here was, I think that first half went about as good as you could have hoped for if you were a Penn State fan, and they were still down by 3 points. Very similar to that LSU game the other day where it's like everything goes perfectly in the first half, and you're still losing. The Buckeyes' talent just really took over in that second half. And then I think that correlated with just not all 11 guys on the field giving 100% effort. And Amari Campbell summed that up perfectly in his post-game interview after the Ohio State game. Was just a lot of times we got 10 guys out there that are giving 100% effort and where they're supposed to be and making the right plays. The problem is that in football, if you got 10 elite players, you're not going to win. It's that simple. And there has been very few times throughout this season, especially after the Oregon loss, that Penn State has had all 11 guys out there on the field in sync, giving 100% effort. That's the issue right now, is they're not playing complete team football. And you can see when you play a team that is playing complete team football like Ohio State, where guys are being unselfish, they are willing to block, they are willing to be double-teamed, they are willing to give other guys opportunities. You can see how that plays out in terms of the results. Yeah, Ohio State's offense, they got vertical. They punished Penn State for trying to double J.J. Smith. Julian Sayin, he faced some pressure on occasion, but now that's 2 games in a row that Penn State hasn't recorded a sack. Sayin, he delivered a Heisman performance. He raised his completion rating above 80% for the season. He threw for 316 yards and 4 touchdowns. Some of his deep balls were simply perfect, and he's playing quarterback better than anyone in America right now. It's incredible what happens when you pair a bunch of 5-star wide receivers with a 5-star quarterback. However, the ground game is really where Ohio State put the game away, with Bo Jackson rushing for 8.1 yards per carry and James Peoples adding a couple of nice runs as well. Penn State, they used a nice dose of Katron Allen, but he wasn't effective in the second half. Kotelicki's play calling became as vanilla as creamery ice cream. I don't understand it at this point. It's almost like he's trying to go away from what he thought was working. Whatever worked in the first half, he didn't go back to it. Whether it was the 7-0 line formations, whether it was the vertical over the middle passing to Kobe Howard, which that's been frustrating. It was nice to see Nick Singleton make some nice plays, but the fact that Singleton was Penn State's leading receiver with 28 yards is a big problem. Yeah, it sucks that Drew Aller's hurt, and yeah, it would be a different game if he was in there, but it's tough seeing guys like Kobe Howard not get more opportunities, and it's tough to see Grunk so limited. Let him loose. Let the boys go play football. If he throws an interception, then you weren't going to win anyways. But I thought the team showed no interest in winning this game with how they played in the second half, just with the effort level. Just with the complete team mentality, it just wasn't there. And that's the kind of stuff that I thought Terry Smith was going to be able to remedy with the rejuvenation of this team after Franklin was fired. That hasn't happened so far. The things that he said is awesome, but the execution hasn't been there. He's saying that the team's going to start playing like a team, but they haven't done it yet. Now you're playing, in my opinion, the best team in the country next week. You're going to have to play like a team to beat the most team-oriented team in the country in Indiana. And I could talk about the Caleb Downs targeting. It didn't make an impact on the game, really. But I just thought it was kind of ridiculous because the Big Ten has been open in saying how they want to call less targeting because they don't like ejecting players, but it's getting out of hand when fans and analysts across the country can all agree that a play is textbook targeting according to the definition that the NCAA has set, and it was overturned. Forget the play, forget that game. The Big Ten needs to match the rest of college football with the way it deals with targeting, because allowing players like Downs to do whatever they want out there and not penalizing them for it is straight up unsafe. Targeting was made to protect the players, and the Big Ten isn't doing it. And then another interesting storyline, as I shift gears a little bit here, with this game that was mentioned a lot, was the Brian Hartline candidacy for the Penn State head coaching job. Hartline obviously is leading one of the best offenses in the country, and it shows that as a play caller or not, his recruiting and development of elite talent completely changes the way your team operates. If this past weekend was a sort of job interview, Hartline nailed it. And if you look at the top feasible options for Penn State, Hartline among Jeff Brom and Kenny Dillingham, he would be a strong hire that Penn State would now have elite potential over the next several years. You're seeing so many teams fire coaches right now, right, that haven't even been at their school for 3 years, coaches that really... coaches that hadn't really even been at their school, guys that hadn't had the potential to improve those schools. Hartline is an up-and-coming coach that if put in the right situation, he could become one of the top coaching names in all of college football. You'd be hard-pressed to name someone who's recruiting at a higher level than him. And that's because he's one of the most, if not the most important recruiter in college football right now. Such an important aspect of a head coach is to be able to recruit, and Hartline's doing that. It's that simple. It's interesting with how last week panned out, with several developments for top coaching candidates. The big ones, Brent Key and Georgia Tech. The big deterrent to going after Key was that Georgia Tech was probably going to make the playoffs. Now that he loses to NC State in an ugly loss, the big thing is, do you even want Brent Key anymore? I know that might sound stupid to say, well, one game can't completely change your opinion on a guy. That's sort of how it was with him and many other guys. That's why we got rid of Franklin in the first place, because he lost a couple of games he needed to win. This was a game Georgia Tech needed to win. It's that simple. I would go out and say that I think this would be a reason to not hire him at this point. That is a very bad loss. North Texas, they got a huge win over Navy. That means Eric Morris, he could be in the playoffs. That would make it impossible for him to leave UNT. I think Penn State, if they want to hire Morris, they got to hope that they don't make it now. But I think he was going to be one of the longer shot guys in the first place. And then finally with the ACC going into chaos, it also opens the door for Louisville as the favorite to win that conference, meaning Jeff Brom could be off the board if the Cards were to make the playoffs. That would be interesting because Brom has been one of the top names of the Penn State head coaching job that people have been floating out there. So it's just something to watch. I'm going to grab some water here. You can look at my luscious locks while I drink the water. Forgot my hat today. Anyway, let's jump into this Indiana game. Since escaping Kinnick Stadium with a 20-15 win over Iowa, the Hoosiers have dominated Oregon and Autzen, beaten Michigan State 38-13, UCLA 56-6, and then on the road at Maryland 55-10. Simply put, they're playing the best football in the country. They might not be ranked number one, but I would pick Indiana over any other team in college football right now. It starts with Fernando Mendoza, the Cal transfer that has electrified the Indiana offense. He's a complete passer, along with the ability to make creative plays on the run. Dual-threat quarterbacks have been a major weakness for Penn State this season, and Mendoza is the cream of the crop. He loves throwing to his elite wide receiver duo, Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt, who have a combined 1,200 yards and 18 touchdowns on the season. In the run game, Maryland's transfer Roman Hemby leads the team in carries, but Kalon Black, a sixth-year senior from Curt Cignetti's JMU days, has stepped up in a big way and leads the team in rushing yards. He's averaging a smooth 6.5 yards per carry and has that home run speed that makes him dangerous at all times. On defense, Lewis Moore leads the way, but the Hoosiers play defense as a team. They have the best rush defense in the Big Ten, only allowing 80 yards a game on the ground. Indiana has the best turnover margin in the country, and they play a fast and free style of football that forces their opponents to make mistakes. If you try to play too carefully, they'll just run circles around you with their speed. I haven't seen a team play so connected and so confidently in a long time, and this Indiana team is a force to be reckoned with. For a team with no 5 stars to be playing this well, this high level of football, is just unheard of. They're nothing like the Indiana team last year that beat up on weak opponents and folded against top competition. This year, Curt Cignetti has put the pedal to the metal, and he's not going to let it up. My prediction, Penn State 14-42 for Indiana. The Hoosiers have never won in Beaver Stadium. They are 0-13. The last 5 times Indiana played Penn State, they were held under 100 rushing yards. This used to be the laughingstock of the Big Ten East. Now, in the era of NIL and transfer portal, Indiana, things are changing, and I think they finally break their losing streak in State College. After Penn State, Indiana plays at home versus Wisconsin, and then at Purdue to end the regular season. They're primed for a trip to Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship, and they seem like a lock to make back-to-back college football playoffs. I already mentioned some of the big results from week 9, but let's jump into what happened in a wild week of college football. First off, Georgia. They got bailed out by the refs again. What's new? As they escaped with a close win over Florida. Listen, some might say that the SEC is really deep. I get the argument. I do believe it is the deepest conference. But I just watch games like this, and with how many stupid mistakes Georgia made, and I just don't think that the SEC has any elite teams. Georgia plays one road game left at Mississippi State before big games against Texas and Georgia Tech. I feel a similar feeling to this team from last year, where even if they end their SEC schedule strong and make the playoffs again, if they run into an all-around team like they did with Notre Dame last year, they're in trouble. Texas took down Vanderbilt despite Diego Pavia's best comeback efforts. What is it with Texas and trying to choke away games? Either way, the Longhorns are back into the playoff conversation, but they must win out, including games over top 5 Georgia and Texas A&M. They got the talent to do it. Do I think they'll do it? No, but they could. It would be the most Texas thing ever to be as confusing as possible. Staying in the SEC, Oklahoma kept their playoff hopes alive with a win over Tennessee. John Mateer still isn't playing his best football, but that OU defense was able to hold on. I think the Vols are now eliminated, because I think even if they went out, they would still need help. It's a miracle they're still in the AP Top 25. I don't think they'll be in the College Football Playoff Top 25, which, by the way, comes out tomorrow night on Tuesday, and of course I will be paying close attention to that to see what the committee says. But yeah, no, Tennessee's out of the playoff conversation. In the Big 12, Utah dominated Cincinnati, and that gives the Utes a clear path to a 10-2 record. They still have a shot at the playoffs, but it's unlikely. All this game does is hurt Cincinnati. And by the way, I want to say one more note that I had here about Tennessee. Tennessee hasn't beaten a team with a winning record this year. I don't know how any AP voter. I know there are a whole bunch of AP voters that just vote SEC teams without even thinking about it. But if you're truly thinking about this, and you look at a team that hasn't beaten a team over a 500 record this season, I don't know how you can look at what Tennessee's doing and say they're a top 25 team in the country. 6-3, none of their wins are good. They haven't really played that competitively in any of their losses. I mean, yeah, they had that close one to Georgia, but they also gave up like nearly 50 points. The Tennessee defense alone, you could just look at that and say they're not a top 25 team. I know the offense is good. I love Joey Aguilar, but I'm kind of just done talking about Tennessee the rest of the year. They just don't have it. USC, they survived an upset bid in Lincoln. This is very similar vibes to that Georgia game where it's like a tough game on the road. Maybe lucked out a little bit. Jordan Maeva, he went 9 of 23 with no touchdowns and an interception. Remember, this is one of the top quarterbacks in the country this season, just laying a stinker at Nebraska. Nebraska probably would have won this game if not for Dylan Raiola suffering a season-ending injury. But nonetheless, the Trojans' playoff chances stay alive. That's something to watch because Penn State plays Nebraska later this season. So it'll be interesting to follow them and see how the backup quarterback does the rest of the year. Now I got to talk about the ACC. The weakest power conference is delivering the biggest excitement as the conference's top teams are dropping like flies. Miami loses in overtime to SMU as Carson Beck does what he does best and throws another INT in crunch time. The Canes lost their first game outside the state of Florida, and now they're 2-2 in ACC play. This loss is Miami's 6th loss as a double-digit favorite under Mario Cristobal. And their reputation for being overrated just grows larger. I don't get it. I was saying it literally just last week that Miami was technically still in the playoff hunt, but that they were going to lose some random game like SMU and Pitt. It's almost predictable at this point. Like, it's almost like you just know they're going to throw some game that they shouldn't. I mean, thinking about it now, I probably should have bet my house on SMU. It's like Miami, that lucky win over Notre Dame is the only thing keeping them ranked. Because otherwise, I don't think you could look at that team and say that they're a top 25 team right now. And I think the way the playoff committee is just going to view it between those two teams is, yeah, Miami and Notre Dame technically have the same record, which is absurd to think about. One of those teams is going straight up in terms of their trajectory. One of them is going straight down. It's that simple. Miami is really in trouble, and they're not in position to even make the ACC title game. And then after Miami lost, Georgia Tech said, wait, I can do better than that, and then proceeded to give up 48 points to NC State. Haynes King had over 500 all-purpose yards, but his defense was still Halloween partying in Atlanta and forgot to make the trip to Raleigh. Somehow, Georgia Tech remains in the conversation to make the ACC title game, but it's still unlikely. They'll need some help. Staying in the ACC for a little bit longer, Virginia, who also lost to ACC opponent NC State, is undefeated in conference play and is atop the ACC standings. Stay with me here. This confusing scenario is because Indiana canceled out of their out-of-conference game against Virginia before the season started. And in Virginia's scramble to find a new out-of-conference game, they ended up agreeing to play NC State in a non-ACC game. So despite losing to NC State, Virginia is 5-0 in conference and also has won 5 games in a row by 10 points or less. Virginia's remaining schedule is Wake Forest, at Duke, and Virginia Tech, so while it doesn't make any sense, Virginia has a clear-as-day path to the ACC title game. Whether they win that or not would be an entirely different conversation. Louisville, Georgia Tech, Pitt, SMU, and Duke all have one ACC loss, And somehow, for the most part, they all avoid each other. Just sit back and get your popcorn ready while we watch a bunch of mediocre teams battle it out for the ACC's free spot into the playoffs. Before Week 11, the playoff committee will have quite a meeting on Tuesday as they release their first set of rankings. Their list always differs a bit from the AP poll, and with all the chaos going on, it'll be interesting to see what they've thought of the first 10 weeks of football so far. I'll be paying close attention to that. Make sure you tune into it. Obviously, unless you have YouTube TV, in which case you can't tune into it. In Week 11, we get a huge Friday night game between Tulane and Memphis as two of the top teams in the G5 meet head-to-head. Navy, Memphis, UNT, Tulane, USF, and ECU all have one loss in the American Conference. So while I think it'll be UNT against whoever wins this Tulane-Memphis game, the American is wide open right now. Saturday at noon is the biggest game of this weekend, a top 10 matchup to decide the Big 12. BYU heads to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech while College Game Day is in town. If BYU wins, they remain undefeated and take control over the conference. If Tech wins, they likely go to the Big 12 title game. And then the winner of BYU-Cincinnati in a few weeks would decide their opponent. With Houston losing, it seems like the Big 12 is a three-team race the rest of the way. I love BYU's physicality along with Bear Bachmeier's toughness, but Texas Tech is statistically better and simply has more talent. I expect to take over from David Bailey and the rest of the Tech linebackers in this game. An interesting game at 3:30 is Oregon at Iowa, as the Ducks struggled against Wisconsin 2 weeks ago, and Iowa just dismantled Minnesota 41-3. Both teams were on bye last week, and of course Oregon is more talented, but Kinnick Stadium has been a nightmare for every team that has entered this season. I expect Oregon to win, but it won't be easy. And it's one of those things where you can just say, this is a quote-unquote trap game, but if a trap game is too obviously a trap, is it still a trap? Oregon's obviously going to be prepared, but it's one of those things where I think Iowa just has the formula to being able to beat Oregon. It's just coming up with, does Iowa have the same level of execution that they had against teams like Indiana and Penn State this season that they gave a really tough time? Moving on, at night, Navy heads to South Bend to take on the Fighting Irish as Notre Dame looks to build on their playoff resume. The Irish have that big win over USC, but wins over Navy and Pitt, who are just outside of the AP Top 25, should be enough to secure Notre Dame a home playoff game. Navy just ran for 311 yards against North Texas, but couldn't put enough points on the board to avoid the loss, so they look to bounce back and avoid a losing streak. This is one of those games where Notre Dame, they're coming off of that maybe slow start against Boston College. They were able to finish strong. Slow starts has been kind of a common thing for Notre Dame this season. Overall, they're looking much better than they did a few weeks ago. Navy's one of the best rushing, if not the best rushing offense in the country. So Notre Dame has to be ready for that, and they have to be ready to defend a really tough style of football. I think they are, but this will be a really fun game to watch. Obviously, South Bend at night, Notre Dame Stadium at night, it's awesome. It'll be a great environment, and I can't wait. That's probably my favorite game of Week 11. Now, let's take a quick look at the playoff picture, right? How are things shaping up? My list is pretty similar to how it was last week, so if you checked that out, you got a head start, but there's a few changes with some teams winning and losing last week. I got number 1, Indiana, still. Number 2, Ohio State. That remains the same. A&M still at 3, Oregon at 4. I got Alabama at 5, Notre Dame at 6, and then Georgia at 7. Here's where it really starts getting different. I have Texas Tech at 8. I replaced BYU with Texas Tech because I do think Tech will win this weekend. I think if BYU wins this weekend, I'll just throw them into that spot. I'll just swap them out. I have Ole Miss at number 9. They are sitting pretty right now. I think they could even be up a little further. That's just where I had them in here. I have Oklahoma at number 10. I think they jumped back into my playoffs, but they still have work to do, right? This is one of those teams where I think if they lost one or two more games, they'd 100% be out. But if they won a couple more games, I think they'd 100% be in. So they're just one of those teams to monitor the rest of the way. Number 11 out of the ACC, I got Louisville. That's my pick to win it. I think as of right now, technically, it's Pitt and Virginia who would be in the ACC title game if it was tomorrow. But I'm still picking Louisville because I think Pitt and Virginia, I think Pitt will lose a game the rest of the way. I think Virginia will probably be in the ACC title game no matter what. And then my G5 pick is now North Texas. I'd been rolling with Navy all season, but I said last week whoever won the Navy-North Texas game would be my pick to represent the G5, and North Texas won convincingly, and so I'm plugging them in. North Texas going to the playoffs. On the doorstep, these are all teams that you could easily see going into the playoffs. These are teams that have a path the rest of the way. BYU, Virginia, Texas, Georgia Tech, USC, Michigan, Memphis, Tulane, and James Madison. Basically, the way I'm putting this is, if those teams win out, they are locked, guaranteed into the playoffs. Last week, I talked about the 16 teams that realistically had a chance to make the playoffs. After just 1 week, that number has jumped to 20 teams. It's looking more and more likely that a 3-loss team makes it, especially if the SEC continues to beat up on itself. I'm picking Louisville, North Texas, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and Indiana as the auto bids, but some of those conference races are still wide open. Penn State basketball starts their season tonight against Fairfield. Freddie DeLeon, Dom Stewart, and Eli Rice are the only returning players from last season. But Coach Rhodes brought in Penn State's best recruiting class in program history. Let's talk more about this basketball team because they tip off their season. Caden Mingo, the top recruit in Penn State history, balled out in preseason and seems primed to lead the Nittany Lions this year. Eli Rice is back from injury. He's a menace from three-point land. Plus, Coach Rhodes brought in 4 new players from Europe, including 7-foot center Ivan Juric. Josh Reed and Melatunka are injured, but Penn State should be able to cruise through their early season schedule without them and get their boost in production for more important games down the stretch. This team brings a youthful and fresh energy, and while there will be growing pains, this group has tons of potential and could be a surprise in the Big Ten this season. There's a lot of wild cards on this roster, and if the chemistry hits right and the overall efficiency improves, Penn State Hoops will be in for a fun season, man. Like I said, Penn State plays Fairfield tonight in the BJC, and then they head to Connecticut to play New Haven on Saturday. My prediction for the Fairfield game, Penn State 88, 62 for Fairfield. Show up. Be loud at the BJC tonight. This team's going to be a lot of fun, and Coach Rhodes is primed for a huge season. He led the team to their best offense in program history last year, and I think this group has even more potential despite the lack of experience. Whew, that's a jam-packed show. If you're going to the Indiana game this weekend, I hope it's a lot of fun. I was really hoping it was going to be at night. I'm not sure which game snagged the night spot, but I know the Indiana-Penn State game is going to be at noon. I can't complain about it. Penn State has done absolutely nothing this season to earn a second night game. If they did play at night, it would just be because Indiana earned it. You know, it's one of those things where I've been talking up this Indiana team for several weeks. This is, my opinion, the best team in the country. I think they're playing better than anybody else. I'm so scared to play this team. I think the current line was like Indiana minus 14.5. I always would hate to say to bet against Penn State, but listen, I'm predicting 42-14 as my score. That's a lot more than 2 touchdown lead for Indiana. The way this team is playing, the way that they just go full throttle the whole way, the way that their backups come in, it's not like, okay, Kurt Snady just leaves his starters out there all game. He's been pulling his starters in the halfway through the third quarter, and his backups go out there and just keep annihilating teams. It's not fair, really, how deep this squad is, just how talented they are through and through. Just a whole bunch of 3-star, 4-star guys that are just performing at all-American level. It's really fun to watch. You will be able to see it in person on Saturday. Even if the expectation is that Penn State gets creamed, you'll still get to watch some top-notch football, even if it's from the opposing sideline. It's a little interesting because we hadn't seen Indiana really be this scary probably since the Michael Penix days. Even if last season they were a playoff team, they didn't really feel this way. This year, they're just physically annihilating teams on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, in the trenches, they just went to Oregon and bullied them, pushed them around. And this was an Oregon team that kind of pushed around Penn State. And last week, Penn State really struggled in the trenches against Ohio State. And Penn State has struggled against mobile quarterbacks this season. And Fernando Mendoza is probably the best mobile quarterback in college football. And it's just so many factors coming together that I think this is a really big storm for Penn State to go up against. And they're definitely not ready for it in terms of the morale and the mentality in the locker room, and with Franklin gone and a lot of the players seemingly giving up. And like I said, if all 11 players on the field are locked in, and that might even entail putting some younger dudes out there. Like I said, guys like Kobe Howard, Tassir Denmark. If you want some juice in the offense, throw Corey Smith out there. Put Cam Wallace out there. Guys that aren't necessarily making a lot of NIL money, but they're guys that need development, and they're guys that have made plays every time they've been on the field. That's what's frustrating to watch. Is like, oh, Kobe Howard just made a nice play over the middle, got a 20-yard catch, and let's sit him on the bench the rest of the game. Like, come on, man. I want to see more of 3. I want to see more of 4 out there. It's like, so hopefully against this Indiana game, Penn State does something special, makes some plays. Still got a lot of talent. But Indiana's a really, really tough team, and I'm expecting them to win big. I will see you all at the BJC tonight. Hopefully Penn State basketball looks good. If any of the Penn State sports teams look good, hopefully it's the basketball one, because football is starting to look rough. But that'll be all. Thank you all for watching. It'll be a big weekend of Penn State sports and other sports as we really get towards playoff time. And it's so much fun talking about the 12-team playoffs opposed to 4-team or even 2-team, where it's like so many teams still in the conversation. Like I said, we got like 20, maybe even more teams that still are in the conversation to make the playoffs. That's so awesome. I even saw something the other day. I know I got to finish up here, but saw something the other day with R.J. Young. I don't normally agree with R.J. Young on a lot of things, but he released a model for a 24-team playoff that just looked like a lot of fun. Like, you look at some of the matchups and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that would be fun. And just that size of the tournament where so much is happening, it would just be really entertaining from a fan perspective and from a team perspective. Like, that ideal scenario where it's like, if you're a top 25 team, you make the playoffs, and then having multiple rounds of home field advantages and potentially multiple rounds of byes. And it's like, that would just be a really fun model, in my opinion. And I'm not sure how close we are to expanding the playoffs again, but I do think it'll happen at some point in the near future, even though 12 has been awesome so far. That'll be all. Thank you all for watching. I'm Josh Davis, and as always, go Nittany Lions.